Coach, I'm so happy to have you on and talk hoops with you. As you know, I've been an admirer of yours for years, and we got to coach against each other, and I've always appreciated not only how great of a coach you were, but just how great the relationships you had with your players. And I'm even more thankful that you took the time to write a contribution to my book, and I definitely want to talk a little bit of recruiting here. So thanks for being on.
Well, I enjoy it. Since retiring, I don't have too many opportunities to sit and talk basketball or talk about my experiences in the game of basketball. So I enjoy it. I talk to other coaches that are retired and kind of get a little network going and
Yeah.
go watch basketball games and keep myself involved that way. But I'm not actively coaching or doing anything else right now. I'm pretty much just enjoying retirement.
Is there anything you do miss about that 12-month grind of coaching a college team?
Yeah, I miss the interaction with the players. Being able to watch them grow. You spend your entire life dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds, and then all of a sudden, you're not involved with them anymore. I mean, you know them,
Right.
and I've got a network of former players that they're in their 50s,
Right.
and you're still close friends with all of them and still involved in their lives, and so that's good. But I miss the new blood coming in and getting to be part of somebody else's story. And then the competition that's involved in the game of basketball, and teaching young kids how to compete in the right way and to be successful. So, that was my challenge the whole time.
Right. And I don't think people realize your story. When I go through your bio, your story is really similar to Mike Krzyzewski's in terms of, they were ready to fire Mike his first 3 years. And I know when you started at WashU, you had nothing. You built that program from the dust, didn't you?
Yeah, they didn't have a team for 10 years.
Right.
And I had graduated from here, from WashU, and I had played at WashU. So
Right.
I knew the quality of the school. But at that time, it was in the 70s. I graduated in late 1969. And so um, throughout the 70s, it just became it was a turbulent social time.
Right.
And athletics wasn't really earmarked of being of import to Washington University. And the athletic director was the football coach, and he decided that he needed more money for football, and he dropped basketball. So it went for 10 years without a team. And,
Amazing.
and meanwhile, I was coaching at Washington State University. After I got out of the Army, I was fortunate enough to go out to Washington State. And as soon as I got there, they had a coaching change. So I went to work for George Raveling. It was his first year as a head coach and was there for 9 years. Then they started basketball at Washington U, and they convinced me that they were going to, they had a new president, new athletic chancellor, new athletic director, new provost, the whole works. And they felt that athletics could be a key part of cultural development on the campus. And so that's why I left Washington State to go to a Division III program that didn't even have the team.
Right.
But in some ways, I saw that as uh, a good thing. In other words, I could establish the culture from the beginning. I
Yes.
didn't have to inherit somebody else's culture,
Right.
and that was something that was important to me. So anything that grew out of that grew out of both opportunity to do it and the fact that we built the culture as we went along.
Right.
So that's how I got into all this.
How much did you take from Coach Raveling to really start that culture, and how much of it was in your soul? This is what I need to do for me. This is my vision. Where,
That's a good
where did it all
question
come from?
because you know part of mentoring is teaching somebody how to do things the right way, and
Correct.
part of mentoring is providing an example for that person to do it a different way. In
Right.
other words, you say, well, this will work for me, but not, or for him, but not for me. And being able to understand that. But I think the thing that was so important with my relationship with George was that um, I picked up the attributes of success from him. You know, how much hard work has to go into it, how to interact with other people, um, how to build a team, how to find the type of players that are going to fit not only with you as a person, but with your philosophy as a coach.
Right.
And those are the things that, if you're going to be successful, those things have to be met. And working with George for 9 years, we had 3 years that we lost. And our fourth year, it was okay. You better win this year or you're gone. And we won. And then we went on to proceeded on through the next, well, as long as I was there until 1981, of having the second winningest record in the Pac-10 at that time. It was Pac-8 when I first went there. So you turn something around by persistence and belief, not by changing.
Right.
In other words, if you do something and it doesn't work, you change right away. No, you do something. If it doesn't work, you tweak it and you figure out why it didn't work and you build on it. You don't disband it.
Right.
Otherwise, your players are going to look at you and say, you don't even believe in yourself. How can you get us to believe in us? You
Right.
know.
Right.
So I was fortunate to learn a lot of that from George Raveling. I mean, he was a true believer in hard work, but his persistence and how to see beyond tomorrow
Right.
and to be able to take that and to build something that's meaningful and works. And so I tried to apply that to our program at Washington U, and it took. We had the first year we won 3 games. The second year we won 6. The next year we run 8. But I was enjoying it. I was kind of perplexed.
Right.
Because I was starting to get good players. The first year was just all walk-ons, but I had some really good players on that team, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And we built with that, and went from there. And in the fourth year, we had our first winning season, and then we won for 33 straight years. So that's a lot of it's believing.
Right.
And I instilled in our players the belief that we could win a national championship. And I tried to schedule teams that had won championships, teams that were at the caliber of winning championships, whether they won it or not. And we took our lumps.
Yeah.
But then we started identifying with that level of competition. That's what we expected. And the players that came in, they wanted that. And so for all those years, all the way up to 2008, so what's that? It's 27 years. We chased a dream. And then in 2008, we won it.
Yeah.
And that validated everything all those kids went through that built up to that. They shared in that championship and they knew it. Even the kids that were on the losing team, those first 3 years. But the nicest thing is we won in the fourth year. So every kid that has played in my program, that at least 4 year, after those, if it was a junior on that first year, he didn't. But any freshman on that first year team ended up playing on a winning team.
That's amazing.
And to me, that was that was important, because you can't win a championship if you don't have the tools. You can't rely on the right bounce taking you to the championship game, and that happens so often.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, we had 3 bounce the first year we won the national championship. We had 3 bounces that could have knocked us out. One of them was in the The first year we won the championship, our All-American point guard broke his leg 3 games in and didn't play the rest of the year.
That was against me.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right. You were there.
yeah,
Yeah,
I was
Sean
there.
Wallace.
Yeah, what a great player. And that crushed me. He was such
Yeah.
a great kid. I'm sure he's still a great man, but he was such a great player. It's the last thing I wanted to happen.
Yeah, it was devastating.
Yeah,
But the point was that we were building the team, and I brought a JV point guard up who ended starting in the national championship game that year.
amazing. Amazing.
And, so a lot of that stuff is, in retrospect, you can understand the whys of how we did something. But
Right.
when you're going through the process, it really takes a lot of commitment and perseverance and to believe in it. And, we had a lot of conversations with the players after tough losses and after great wins,
Right.
uh, as to just what was taking place and how that was going to evolve.
Coach, when Maryville hired me, I was the youngest college basketball coach in the country. I was 26 years old. And, I was full of piss and vinegar and was ready to take on the world. And I remember coaching against you in that first year. And I thought we were really prepared for you. I really did. I thought we'd done the scout, we'd watched every film we could watch. And I think you guys beat us by 40. And for me, it, I had, I took a step back and I went back and watched the film that I was watching ahead of time. And then I watched our film. And what I started to do, and I stopped watching the game and I started watching you. And what I realized is your demeanor on the sideline, the relationships you were having with your kids, the communication you were having with the kids was 90% of what I wasn't doing. And it was you were such a great role model for me to understand who I needed to be more than what I was teaching. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with success in coaching. I've had young assistants or not volunteers, part-time assistants or whatever that are trying to move up in the field of coaching.
Right.
And you gotta get it. That's all there is. You have to have that feel. You got to know when to push and when to back off. And
Right.
my biggest thing is that every time you walk off a court after a ball game and you walk into a locker room, you're going to say something significant to those kids, whether
Right.
you want to or not.
Right.
Their eyes are looking at you, and something just happened. Basketball's nothing more than manufactured chaos,
Right.
and it's an emotional experience. And I enjoyed that challenge, believe it or not. I mean, I
Yeah.
never sat on the bench thinking about, okay, what am I going to say if we lose?
Right.
You know, I
Right.
never worried about that. I
Right.
never, that wasn't but walking to the locker room when I'm after the game's over and going down to the locker room, that was very critical.
Yeah.
And I really felt that one thing that I did different than some coaches is that when a game ended, I wanted to be their first significant personal interaction.
Right.
So we didn't run over and hug our parents and let them give us feedback and soothe our aches if we lost and pump us up if we won. We went to the locker room and then we became a team.
Right.
And then, again, we whatever happened in that game was brought to bed, and then they could go out and handle whatever they want to handle. But I thought that, I know that a lot of people don't do that, which is fine. I mean, everybody has their own style. It doesn't mean that I was right and they were wrong.
Right.
But I feel that helped me as a coach understand what it is that I had to do in order to be successful.
Well, they
And
needed to understand that you were that voice. You were the person they needed to hear from, win or lose or whatever it was. That it started with you, it needed to end with you that night, right?
right yeah, to a certain extent, but at the same time, it's a give and take. It's an interaction.
Sure.
And if there's somebody there that's not pleased with something or this or that or whatever, let's resolve that before we walk out the door.
Right.
When you have an emotional experience, each person reacts to that differently, you know,
Right.
and part of coaching is being able to, I don't like to use the word manipulate, but in a way you do manipulate how they deal with their emotions. Instead of pointing a finger at somebody, you examine what the team can do.
Right.
It's like the old thing: if the kid misses a free throw to cost them the ball game, is he the one that's responsible for the loss? Of course not. There's nobody that
Right.
would say he was, but that's just the most obvious of it. There's all kinds of other things. If you weren't ready when you came in off the bench, um, if you didn't interact the way you should with the players that are on the floor,
Right.
if you didn't listen to what we were going to be doing, if you didn't pay attention during the scout, there's all kinds of ways that you can tip the boat. And I think as a coach, recognizing that, or more importantly, making them aware of that, it pays its dividends. And so I always say that the most significant thing I did as coaching occurred in the first minute after a ball game when I looked into their eyes and had to respond.
I love that. I love that. Well, I don't know if I told you this, but I'm back coaching high school basketball after 10 years away. And I just feel like it's a completely different world. I'm having so much more fun. I'm enjoying the minutia that I don't think I had the maturity to enjoy 25 years ago. And I'm fine the things that you're talking about. I feel like I've embraced those things to the T, and we're seeing results because of it. The relationships I have are better. The ownership that the players are taking, what they expect from themselves is so much greater. How much being on George Raveling's staff for 8 years and really being able to grow into yourself, do you feel like affected what became a Hall of Fame career as a coach? Having those 8 years to really figure out what you were made of.
Well, I don't think there's any question because I went to Washington University by choice.
Right.
And George and I would have a number of conversations. I was playing at the highest level or coaching at the highest level in the country in college basketball.
Right.
And we were having success. John Wooden was sitting on the other bench.
Right.
Ralph Miller was sitting at the other bench. Bob Boyd, Howie Delmar. I mean, you can go down the list of the coaches on the West Coast. Now, outside of Wooden, a lot of people weren't as familiar with them because there was no media. I mean, you'd read it in the paper, but the games would be over before the papers could publish, and it was old news by the time it got in it. But I was able to watch them and interact them. And George, you know, he would send me to watch somebody else's practice, believe it or not, if we were going to try to put in some innovative thing. So uh, uh, Carol Williams, who was the coach at Santa Clara, was running an offense that he called flex. Okay, and it was a West Coast offense, and I went down there and visited with him and watched it, and we put it in. And then when I came to WashU, it was a perfect offense for smart kids with, I won't say limited ability, but they each had strengths, but their weaknesses were strong too.
Right. Right.
And so we would run this disciplined offense in order to get good shots and to be able to keep the team together, et cetera. And it was effective. But then as we got better, it became necessary to figure out an offense that did all those things, but gave them more freedom to be able to be players.
Right.
And that's where I developed my next offense. And I just kind of put things together myself on that. And they bought into it. And we ran it up until the day I retired because it gave us a lot of freedom for individuals. I mean, even to the point where we just throw the ball to somebody and let them go one on one.
Right.
But you and I got all that from my experiences at the D1 level. The other big thing at the D1 level that I got and I learned is, where do I want to be? You know, everybody has a dream of being the very best you can be, but
Right.
sometimes they don't recognize that you have to pick the environment that is. You know, you can dream big, but you got to dream smart. And I knew that I could interact. I liked smart kids.
Right.
So in 1977, Al McGuire won the national championship. And I think it was 77, maybe 78. But anyway, I went to his Final Four clinic that next year when he's talking. And I knew Al McGuire through other clinics and whatnot and spending time with him. And he spoke at this clinic and he made a statement that you can't win with smart kids. Okay. And this became,
Wasn't Al the one that said he didn't recruit kids that had grass in the front lawn?
yeah, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, he said basically what he's saying is you have to have kids that will to follow you blindly.
Right.
Okay. And I'm sitting there and I'm debating, and I had just, been had I couldn't even get an interview at, let's see, what was it? Northern Arizona.
Okay.
Okay. It's a school that, if you go back and look, I don't think they've ever had a winning season since the 1970s. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, it's one of those jobs. If you come in and you have one winning season, you're moving out of there and going somewhere else to
Right.
move up the ladder.
Right.
And I couldn't even get interviews. And we were, I was a assistant. There's only two assistants at that time at the school, at any school. And I'm saying, this isn't where I want to be. Where you've got to hustle and bustle and do it with kids that aren't that. We had 15 scholarship players. 14 of them thought they were going to be in the NBA.
Right.
And the 15th one is the most successful of all of them. He's a lawyer up in Spokane. Um, it's just not a realistic dream sometimes.
Right.
And this provided me with an opportunity to work with the type of kids that I was, to be able to give my experiences to kids that can handle it the way I handled it and to use it for their own success. So I learned all that. I learned that by being in a situation where I think I could see what has to happen. I knew what you had to do to win, and I knew what I had to do in order to do it my way. And that's why I went to Washington U. And we lost for 3 years. And did I have doubts? Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. And a friend of mine was Judd Heathcote, who coached Michigan State,
Right.
and Magic Johnson. And Judd was an assistant at Washington State before I went there.
Okay.
And he's a native of the Northwest, and I got to know him pretty well. And in fact, I sent him a player uh, that we didn't take at Washington State that ended up starting on his national championship team.
No kidding.
And so anyway, Judd, yeah, it was a kid from St. Louis actually. And so Judd and I, remained friends. Didn't communicate all that much. I don't call these coaches all the time or anything, but we would every now and then he'd text me or I'd call him or whatever. And after that third year of losing, he called me up and he said, "Okay, Mark, now you want to come back with the big boys?" And he had an assistant's job open. and wanted to know if I would be interested in coming back to Division One. And I had to think. I didn't. I said no. I'd be copping out on my own dream and belief in what I'm doing is the right thing. So I passed up on that, and of course the rest is history. But I think really believing in what you're doing is important. Not thinking what you're doing is right, but knowing what you're doing is right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Such
you
great
know,
advice for any coach, no matter your age. It's just you see so much jumping around now. Everybody's trying to get to a higher level. And so I'd say 90% of those coaches end up failing when they were having such great success where they were. And they were really building a community. They were building much more than a basketball team. So to leave that, I've always found so sad.
yeah, and Al McGuire's also said that he'd never coached the NBA unless he made more than the highest paid player on his team.
Well, that's not going to
And
happen anymore, is it?
yeah, and look at today. I
Yeah,
mean, nowadays it's seeped down into the college level, and you're seeing good college coaches get out of the game,
right.
or good college coaches not having success because the parameters have changed. Being a good coach means getting them into the NBA, selling them on that you're the one that's going to do it to them. Recruiting your own players. I talked to a D1 guy the other, about last year, I guess it was, and at a big time, a Power Five school, and he was lamenting the fact that he had to recruit his own team each year, plus recruit players from other teams. It's a totally different thing, and he says you get paranoid, and it hurts your communication with your own team because he said his best player he hadn't talked to him in like 3 weeks after the end of the season was over. And for some reason they hadn't talked, and he couldn't get hold of him. And this finally got hold of him, and the player was pissed that he would doubt that he was going to be back. I mean, it's like you're seeding or sowing a seed there
Right.
of why you shouldn't be in my program. And anyway, it's a totally different dynamic. The coaches that started when I did, that are successful Division Ones, that gone up the ladder, etc. You know, they're getting out.
Yeah.
They're saying this isn't what I perform the best in. This isn't mine. Now there's other coaches that can. They're very good at it. They know how to deal with it. That's fine.
Yeah.
Uh, to say I got the best years out of college. I think that I got the best years for what I do
Yeah.
as a coach to have success. Nowadays, I would have to be a different coach than I was for the 47 years that I was a college coach.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a different world out there. But when you see you know big name coaches retiring now, if they're my age, it's understandable, and
Right.
like Mike Krzyzewski. But if it's somebody else that's in their late 50s or whatever, and they're having success, and you can look back at the ones who've changed, who walked away, and they said
Right.
why, and well, that's why.
That's right.
You're smart enough to know what you do well,
Yeah.
and if this isn't it, look elsewhere.
Right. The great coaches always can adapt to the change of the circumstance, but there comes a point where you have to look in the mirror and go, all right, do I really want to make this change? How much do I want to adapt?
Right. Yep. And the yeah, it's and there's some coaches that are perfectly fine with that. They're perfectly
Right.
fine with the but I really valued my relationship with players, really valued it,
Right.
and still do. And I thank God for it because now I have all these guys that stay in touch with me, and
Right.
you know, and the new coach at WashU that took my place valued that, Pat Yuckham, and
Yeah,
he
that's
came into
great.
the program. He loved us, and I knew Pat for 10 or 12 years prior to him coming to WashU. When his first year as a head coach was at Coe College.
My alma mater. Yeah, I know Pat
Yep.
well. Yeah.
And at Coe College, the guy who was the vice chancellor or vice president in charge of athletics and student life was a friend of mine who was at WashU, my age, came at the same time I did, and we were good. And he'd ride with us. You know, he was just in student affairs, but he would ride with us to games, and we were good, close friends. And he moved there or moved around, and by then he became the head guy there at Co. So he was instrumental in drawing Pat there, and Pat won, and so he brought him down, and we spent a day talking about what you do to build a program.
Right.
And then he went from there to Oshkosh, which is in that tough Wisconsin league, and finishing at the bottom of it in the lower half anyway, for sure. And he turned it around and took him to the national championship game
Yeah.
and had everybody coming back, and left that to come to WashU because that was more the culture he was not, I shouldn't say it was any different than what he had built there,
Right.
but he felt that at WashU was something that he could continue to grow there.
Yeah. And he has.
Um, and so, the players, my former players, he reached out to them and kept them in the program. Um, this, was it a year and a half ago now? My last recruit at WashU, who I did not coach, but I recruited him, and I had a nice recruiting year for Pat when his first year. But anyway, he was an All-American, a great kid, a superstar, and he developed stomach cancer
Hmm.
and died
Oh,
after. And his senior year, senior year, he was undergoing chemotherapy while he was playing, which was just unheard of. And the doctors had a marvel, and ESPN picked it up, and it became a big feature. And it was up for an ESPY, their production they did on him. Um, and this was something that Pat had to deal with. I
right.
mean, and the type of program, the players on his basketball family that he inherited were a big part of helping support the players and the coaches that were going through it. And so, every year now in June, we gather in Chicago for a charity golf outing. I don't golf, but I go. And, we had 50 some former players there at it. So
That's
this
great.
is the value of basketball.
Well, that's the community and the culture you built, and Pat embraced it and has continued to grow it, and it speaks to your legacy, coach, which is um, top notch for me. And I've told you this, it's the Mount Everest. So now listen, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk. I didn't talk offense with you because I love your offense, and I'm so thankful you sent me your playbook, and I've been going through it, and I've been taking things from it and tweaking what I'm doing this year. Tell me about building an offense from the beginning, from that first practice, October 15th. How much are you putting in those first couple of weeks? How what are you trying to give the boys going into those first couple of games? How much do you want them to really feel great about, and how much do you want them just to understand it? What was your philosophy on building your X's and O's?
I wanted I wanted them to understand what the principles were, why we were doing those things before we built from it. So in other words, we have a rigid, very rigid movement that we would used to do at the beginning of our offense. But as we mastered that, we would deviate And that's what would cause the other team's problems. They knew exactly what we were going to do.
Yep.
Maybe.
We knew what we knew what you thought you were going to do. That's for sure.
And, right. And once you tried to take away one of our basic movements, what you were doing is setting up our channel for success.
Right.
Because we had so many different variations. At one point, we had 28 different plays that we could run.
Right.
And so when we taught offense, there were several really important things for us that we did that are a little different than other places. Is that we'd always run at full speed. You watch anybody that runs any kind of a pattern, you'll see that the guard passes the ball and then they start to trot.
Yep.
So we would run our pattern in 6 seconds with no defense as fast as you could. And so what I said was, okay, you go through all these drills to warm up at the beginning of the practice, and you spend 30 to 40 minutes of warm up before you start to do competitive things and start to do and you do your layup drills and you do all these things that they're, they think they're really comfortable with. So I changed our warm up, our practice starting, our pre-practice or whatever, not a pre-practice, but when we would start, we would do we had one drill that we would do that gave us all of our agility and stuff to get ready. But then we would run dummy. And anytime we ever ran anything defensively, we'd end up with an offensive transition. And anytime we did anything offensively, we'd end up with a defensive transition. So in other words, we never ran and just stopped.
Right.
Because I felt that the 3 seconds or 4 seconds going from offense to defense or defense to offense were a critical part of your success.
I agree.
So what I would do is, and I had a lot of players because we had a JV team too, but we always practiced together. We never separated. So we would have, 20 players. And we would have whatever number teams that we could put on the floor. We'd have 4 teams, 3 teams, whatever it is with subs. I don't know. So one team would run and after running our offense for several years, I said, well, what would happen if we would take our same pattern and do it on the full court from the moment we touched the ball at the far end?
Yeah.
So we started doing that. So really, if you watched us, you would say, well, they're just running we called it swing.
Right.
Bo Ryan called his swing. It's the same time.
I'm running it this year, Coach. I'm running it this year. Yep.
We would say, okay, well, why not run our swing motion from baseline to baseline?
Yes.
So we would release the guards after a made basket, throw the ball ahead, and we're in it. Yep. One pass to a wing, and you're in your movement.
Yep.
So we started doing that, and then we started running our variations out of the swing. And so what we would do in practice for our warm up almost every day is we would run dummy at one end. I'd say score, and they'd score it, and then they'd take it out of bounds and run fast break to the other end dummy, and the other team would be stepping on, and they're running. So you got 2 teams running at both ends. I'd say shoot, they'd shoot, and the team at the one end that was running off the break, they'd come back around the outside. The other one would take off. Third team would come on, be running, and we just keep this thing going.
I love it.
So so we can, if you have enough to have 3 teams,
yeah,
you can do that. If you only have, like, if you're traveling, if your travel team doesn't have quite the right positioning or whatever, you can do it with the 2 teams. We'd run fast break to the other end, and once they got to the other end, they'd step off and the other team would step on, and we just alternate. And this is what we did, and we do this almost every day, to the point where, and if they weren't running it hard, then I'd say, okay, you got 6 seconds to execute. 6 seconds to get all the way through the first variation of the play. And they go, and I put it on the clock. And everything was mixed that way and at that pace. And so I thought that helped us a lot. People would come watch our practices and they'd watch us do that for 8 minutes or 10 minutes. I mean, and if you think about it, you're running full speed, you're passing the ball, you're making shots, you're aware of your teammates, you're doing all the stuff that you do at a drill.
Right.
But you're doing it in the pattern that you're trying to imprint into their habits of being
Right.
able to run this play.
Right.
And so the players would buy into it. And each year, freshmen would come, and if they'd want to break the pattern at the very beginning, like, get the ball at the top of the circle and drive or something like this, all the guys on the team would start laughing.
I love it.
And the guy says, "Well, I can do this. I can beat my man up here."
Right.
And I say, "Well, then you can beat it when it comes back." But so there was really rigid in order to. It's kind of like starting a car. You got to turn the darn key before you go.
Right.
And this was our key. And once we did that, boom, off we went. So that was kind of my philosophy and
I love it.
how we did it. A lot of coaches, a lot of high school coaches tried to do what we did. And I mean, I had a lot of people that would come and watch practice, and I'd speak at clinics, and I'd send out my playbook and stuff.
Right.
Um, but they would always try. They never had the discipline to stick to what I just told you.
Yeah.
And they would go with their offense. And they'd say, "Well, geez, if you can beat him up there, or if they're going to sag way off, let's not make the next pass. Let's do this." No, you make the next pass, and then the next time you come down, you run something that burns them.
Right.
But you have to have the discipline.
Right.
And so the players loved it. They loved it. The other thing I do or did that I thought was big is I engaged my players. I had smart kids.
Right.
And almost all of our plays or variation or tweaks, we called them tweaks, we'd give it a name, and it would be something that they would come up. They say, "Coach, if we do this, this, and this," and they'd be standing there on the floor talking this, they're 5. And when we go live, if we had 3 teams, they'd be 2 teams. One team would be on the side, and they'd try something different.
Right.
And sometimes it'd work, and we'd keep it, put it in, and they named it. I let them give it a name.
I love it. I love it.
And they took ownership of what we were doing.
Yeah.
It wasn't me just telling them, "You do this, this, and this." It was them saying, "Oh, wow. Well, well, Sean Wallace, he wasn't the only one, but we had a play where we throw the ball and all of a sudden he just cut straight to the basket from the top
Yes.
of the third."
I
And
remember him killing us on it. Yes.
and if you were looking for the swing for the reversal of the ball and everything, it wasn't he was going to the basket.
That's right.
And
He was so good
get
at it.
one layup a game at least.
Yep.
And that's all you need. Okay, we can't cheat this way anymore because they're going to give up layups. And we do the same thing. And we'd start out of a 1-4 high set.
Yep.
So the defense now has to commit as to how they're going to play it. And the other thing I was convinced is that every time you cross the midline that runs from the middle of the court from basket to basket, you draw a line from one rim to the other rim. Every time the ball goes from right to left or left to right, the defense has to shift totally.
Right.
And if you do it really quick, at some point, they're not going to shift right.
That's right.
And you're going to get one guy that sees a shift doesn't take place. He goes, and you're out of a 1-4 set, you see how they're set up. And the second thing that we did that was a little different than other places is that people always say that midline that you have from basket to basket, if you play on one side of that midline, then the other side's a help side,
Right.
okay, defensively.
Right.
So we would say, well, let's expand our offensive zone to the other side of the lane from the midline. So we would look to make passes. People wouldn't throw a pass, but we would look to we would say that's a scoring opportunity.
Right.
So we would look for back doors from the weak side, a weak side back door, or a weak side cut. Not the same side all the time, but from the back, where the midline is. If you're on the right side of it, we look for the guy from the left side of that midline going to the basket.
Right.
And so we expand what we called our scoring zone to the width of the backboard. So anything on the back side of the rim was ball side basketball, the way we looked at it.
I love that.
And we get stuff, but what you're really doing is you're creating a line of thinking that your players, it's logical. They believe it.
Yep.
They see it work a couple times.
Yep.
And then they buy into it. And now it becomes something that I remember one time we played a team in our conference who always took pride in knowing what we were going to run. I mean, he would sit and study every single movement and play that we would have.
Right.
And so when we would start a play or start something, he'd call out the name of the play for what he thought it was going to be.
Right.
Okay. So we'd throw the ball, we'd make our first cut, etc. So one time before we played him, Sean Wallace says, "Coach, right here, if instead of cutting there, the weak side guy steps up, sets a back pick, and that guard goes to the basket."
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I know it was a little more involved in that, but it was right in the middle of a set play that was identifiable.
Right.
But all of a sudden there's a back pick, and the guy's gone to the basket, and we throw a lob from the strong side to the weak side because we're playing at that back side of the rim.
Right. Right.
And we would get dunks, okay, in practice. And so he called it surprise. All right. It's a surprise.
Right.
So we ran it against that team. And sure enough, we got a dunk or a lob or got a basket off of it, and for sure.
Did you
And he
contain
turns to
yourself
one
and not look down at the other end?
and I'm chuckling, and he turns to the other coach who he knows well, and he says, "Surprise!" And the
I
guy
love
didn't
it.
realize that he was getting the name of the play.
That's great. But what you're talking about, Coach, what I don't think anybody that's watched you play, and I had to prepare for you, is oftentimes there was no calls. Your guys understood. They knew all the options. They knew, Wallace knew when to cut. He knew when to go off the screen. He knew when to go set a screen. It was all about reading the defense.
After I retired, one of the few coaches in the league says, "Coach, how did you get the guys to know what they're going to run? We watched you. You never said a word."
You never said a word.
No. But what happens is that we go into the start of before every game in the pregame. We would have 3 plays, 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
It might not, they were pretty close to the same ones, but they might be shifted around or whatever, 1, 2, and 3. And then we'd have a bonus, or I can't remember what we called it, or some other one. But those were our go-to plays. Now, we would call plays in huddles. We'd call plays at the foul line. We'd call plays, that might be different than those 3. But what would happen is we called our plays on the defensive end of the floor, not the offensive end. So as we're bouncing back on defense, Wallace is yelling too. So that meant the next time down the floor, we're running 2. And the players all knew that.
That's great. I love that.
And nobody ever figured it out.
I'm stealing all this, coach. I'm tweaking all this. I love it. My brain is on fire. You know, I,
It's
I
it,
I love your 1-4. I love the green and the white and the bear. I love all of it. I mean, it speaks to everything that I feel of the game of basketball. You know, so
well,
I just love it. I love
well,
watching your teams play.
well, the players all enjoyed the mental challenges there.
Yeah,
For instance, we had 4 out of bounds plays, 5 out of bounds. We had 5 out of bounds plays,
yeah.
and they were all pretty effective because they were just one was a variation of another.
Another
And
right.
you couldn't cheat really, and one of them was ended in a lob to one of our good post players at the time. So we'd have effective plays. So instead of having the inbounds player call the out of bounds play, each game we designate one of the 4 players on the floor. All 4 players would hold up a hand with a finger on it, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And, our 2-man might be the one that's going to be the legitimate one. You didn't know which one, the other team couldn't figure out which one it was because they're all holding up their fingers. But the players we would change from game to game. It might be the guy on the baseline. It might be the guy at the first box. It might be the guy up at the top.
Love that.
And so it would create, you know, the coach gave up trying to guess because if you guessed wrong, it was a layup.
Yep. I love that. Oh, that's so great. Coach, I could milk your brain for days on end, but I just thank you for the hour. Thank you for talking hoops with me. I had so much fun. There were things I didn't know about your story that I love, and any young coach out there that's trying to get a start, trying to learn how to build a program. I hope they're paying attention to all your nuggets of wisdom, and I know I've appreciated it. I know I'm 10 times a better coach from getting to watch you up close, getting to talk to you, getting to see how you relate to your players. And the game of basketball is so much better because of you. And, you know, the D1 guys with 1,000 wins get all the recognition, but in my eyes, you're Mount Everest of or Mount Rushmore of coaches. So thank you for your time, Coach. Thank you for your friendship, and thank you for all you've done for me.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that it's like you said, it's not measured in wins and losses. What it measured is in logic.
Yeah,
Will it work? And if it does, believe in it
yeah.
and go for it. So good luck to you. I hope you enjoy your start of coaching again. You
I'm
do a good
I am
job.
I'm loving it. I really am. I'm loving the kids and loving the relationships and loving the joy that they're getting. You know, last night we implemented our system, and we won by almost 40, and we won by almost 40, and I bet we shot 25% from the floor.
Now,
So
what school are you at?
we're at Devlin High School, so D apostrophe Evelyn in Colorado. It's
Oh,
it's got a Wash U vibe to it. They've got the highest ACT SAT scores in the state 4 years running. The kids study 3 to 4 hours every night, and academics and behavior, they're all the priorities of the school, and it's just a great group of kids.
is it outside Denver?
It's just outside Denver, yeah, to the west, yeah.
Okay. You know, uh, Tyler Nading, who played on that team with Sean Wallace,
Yeah, I remember.
lives there.
Yeah,
Tyler lives there in Denver.
he does. Well,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
if you ever talk to him, have him
So
connect.
does Aaron Thompson.
Oh,
Aaron
great.
Thompson lives there in Denver.
If you talk to those guys, give them my phone number and tell them to give me a call if they want to coach, or if they want to just come over and be a part of basketball. I'd love to talk to them and talk their ear off about Wash U and their history.
Okay. I
Yeah.
will. I'll do that.
Thanks again, Coach. I'll let you know when we'll publish this in the next week or so. But thank you for everything, and enjoy your retirement. But I hope you keep talking basketball. I know I'm going to call you about basketball if you'll keep talking.
Feel free to. I enjoy talking about it. So good luck to you.
Thanks, Coach. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye bye.
Bye.